Hello again, and this is my second video on experience, language and logic. And if you've seen the first video, you'll know that I argued specifically in the primacy of experience, and that without experience, language becomes meaningless. I also argued, however, that experience of itself does not constitute meaning. And that is because, for example, animals can have all sorts of experiences, but as far as we know, animals do not manage to produce conceptual meaning. Now, I want to build on what I said in my previous video by exploring further the nature of meaning and the nature of conceptual meaning. Now, the example that I gave, if you remember, was of the baby. And the baby produced, originally had felt needs from which emotions sprang. And those felt needs, when they were fulfilled, it produced a sense of fulfillment, a sense of contentment. When they were not fulfilled, it would have a sense of distress, a sense of maybe even anger. Again, for example, we have a felt need to be secure. And when our body, when our senses tell us that we're threatened, that will mobilise, for example, the baby to cry. If the baby is a little bit older, there'll be mobilised within the baby a fight mechanism. The brain will produce lots of chemicals, or the body produces chemicals that produce tremendous amounts of energy, enabling the baby to fight or flee. And there is also another mechanism that we have, which is to do with not fight or flight, but freeze. If we cannot fight and we cannot flee, this is well documented, we can freeze, we can get disassociated. It's partly a survival technique, because if the predator then goes away, may just wander off, and we might come out of the freeze and survive. Alternatively, if the predator does kill us, then it actually reduces the pain that we have. Now, how does that relate, I hear you asked, to language and to logic? What happens is that the things like the fight, flight and the freeze and the emotions and the sensations are processed in the lower parts of the brain, the more primitive parts of the brain. Or at least they originate in the more primitive parts of the brain. The parts of the brain that resemble mammals and reptiles. There's another part of the brain which seems to be quite unique to human beings, which is the neocortex, and that also has a part of that really sort of works on and processes, if you like, emotions, feelings, and sensations. And but the neocortex is mainly to do with language and logic. So what happens then is that our initial experiencing is firstly within the body. It's not simply that the body carries the brain, although it does carry the brain, but the body actively communicates with the brain as well as the brain communicating with the body. So it's an interactive and it's an interrelational process, and that's very important. And the first response that we have is always a physiological response. It's always a bodily response. The last part of the brain to be activated is the parts of the brain that involve things like language and logic. There is a whole experiential dimension that precedes language and logic. And this brings us then on, in terms of psychology, to healing, and how it is that we're healed of our emotional hurts. Before I get into that, I want to just briefly explore how some of those emotional hurts happen. And what happens, for example, is that we get emotionally disturbed through blocked processes, processes that are experienced in the body, which have a narrative to them, because the neocortex likes to, the part of our brain is the part of the brain by which we explain and we conceptualize and we produce stories. But beneath that conceptualization is a whole experiential element. Now, take for example somebody who, let's say a little boy who is bullied. If he's bullied by his father, he will have those instinctual fight, flight and freeze mechanisms. He can't necessarily fight his father, he can't, may not always flee, he may also experience freezing. And he may also internalize perhaps some of the stuff that his father says, like, you're useless, you're stupid, you can't do anything, etc. And what will happen is that we then have what is called a structure-bound process. In other words, it's a blocked process that involves maybe suppressed feelings, suppressed energy involved with fight and flight. It may even involve a freezing of the person as they cut off from what is happening. So trauma then is really not so much something that's done to us, although it can be, but it's our response. It's a traumatic response involving blocked energy and involving thinking and behaviour processes. Now, the way, in fact, to get to trauma, or the way to heal trauma, is to reintegrate. And what we have in focusing in experiential psychotherapy, of which I'm trained in, is that we go straight. We initially bypass, if you like, the thinking elements, because thinking, as I said before, is a response, a conceptualization from experience, and we go to the experiences themselves. We become aware of those experiences. We acknowledge those experiences. We test out language to see whether it's exactly the right language for that experience, and when we find the right language to fit the experience, we're not trying to fit the experience to the language. When we actually manage to do that, the experience itself begins to change, and it begins to unfold and unwrap, because the body itself has a whole felt sense of any experience. And so by going to the pre-conceptual experiential roots of our emotional problems, by being aware without judging, and by dialogue, we can actually begin to have releases of tension in the body. And when we have releases of tension in the body, we begin to emotionally heal, and as our experience changes, so also our thinking or our conceptualization process changes, and also our behavior begins to change as well. And so this is a brief, a very brief introduction to some of the theoretical basis of both how we make meaning and also how we become emotionally disturbed. And also a very brief look at how we can begin to heal through emotional awareness, through awareness of our body reactions, through awareness of our pre-articulate experiences that indeed we start off with as babies. Okay, well I hope you found that interesting. Some of you may. And I'll do some more videos later on